What her son said when the hospital called about her near-death experience will shock you to your core. This is a story about betrayal, awakening, and the sweetest kind of revenge. Living well. Here's what happened when Anna Stephen refused to be taken for granted anymore. My name is Anna Stephen, and at 58, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening in October, when my world collapsed, literally. I was in my kitchen, preparing dinner as I had done thousands of times before, when suddenly the room began to spin. The granite countertop I had saved for years to afford rushed up to meet me, and everything went black. The next thing I remember was waking up to the steady beep of machines and the antiseptic smell that belongs only to hospitals. Fluorescent lights burned my eyes, and my mouth felt like cotton. A nurse with kind eyes and tired features was checking my for. "Mrs. Stephen? Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but only managed to croak. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been unconscious for several hours. You had a severe cardiac episode. We nearly lost you twice." The words hit me like ice water. Nearly lost me. Twice. "We need to contact your emergency contact," she continued, glancing at her chart. "That would be your son, Michael?" Michael. My only child. The boy I had raised alone after his father walked out when he was 3. The young man I had worked 3 jobs to put through college. The successful businessman who now lived in a mansion across town with his wife, Victoria, at age 34. "Yes," I whispered. "Please call him." The nurse stepped out, and I lay there in the sterile silence, remembering. 28 years of sacrifice. 28 years of putting his needs before mine. 28 years of believing that when the time came, he would be there for me the way I had always been there for him. I was naive. Through the thin hospital walls, I could hear the nurse on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was professional but urgent. "Mr. Stephen? This is Nurse Jennifer at St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother, Anna Stephen, is here. She suffered a severe cardiac event and, yes, sir, it's very serious. The doctors aren't sure if she'll make it through the night." My heart monitor began beeping faster. This was it, the moment when my son would drop everything and rush to my side. The moment when all those years of love and sacrifice would mean something. But the voice that came through the phone made my blood freeze. "Look, I'm busy. I'm taking my wife to dinner at Le Bernardin. Do you know how hard it is to get reservations there? Besides, she doesn't have much time anyway. If she's going to die, she's going to die. Call me in the morning, if she's still alive." The line went dead. I stared at the ceiling tiles, each word echoing in my mind like a death sentence of its own.
I'm busy.
She doesn't have much time anyway. If she's going to die, she's going to die. The nurse returned, her face carefully composed in that way medical professionals master when they have to deliver devastating news. "Mrs. Stephen, I'm so sorry. Your son said he's unable to come tonight due to prior commitments. He asked us to call him in the morning with an update." Prior commitments. A dinner reservation was more important than his dying mother. "I see," I managed to say, though the words felt like broken glass in my throat. The nurse squeezed my hand. "I've been doing this for 20 years, honey. Sometimes the people who should care the most are the ones who surprise us the worst. But you're strong, stronger than you know. You're going to get through this." That night, as I lay alone in the darkness with only machines for company, something shifted inside me. The Anna Stephen who had spent nearly 6 decades putting others first, who had sacrificed everything for an ungrateful son, who had accepted scraps of affection as if they were feast. That woman died in that hospital bed. What emerged was someone different. Someone who finally understood that love without respect is just manipulation. Someone who realized that being a doormat isn't the same as being a good mother. Someone who is about to remind her son that underestimating a woman who has nothing left to lose is a very dangerous mistake. As the monitors beeped steadily through the night, I began to plan. Not my funeral, as Michael probably hoped, but something far more satisfying, his complete and utter downfall. By morning, I was more than just alive. I was awake in ways I had never been before. Before we continue with Anna's incredible journey, I want to share something important with you. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. And if Anna's story is speaking to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of resilience and justice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what Anna does next. 7 days later, I walked out of St. Mary's Hospital under my own power, and I had never felt more alive. The cardiac episode, as it turned out, had been caused by stress and exhaustion, years of working myself to the bone, and never taking care of my own needs. The doctors said I was lucky. With some lifestyle changes and medication, I could live another 30 years. 30 years. More than enough time for what I had planned. Michael hadn't visited once during my week-long stay. Not once. The nurses tried to hide their disgust, but I could see it in their eyes every time visiting hours ended, and my room remained empty. Other patients had flowers, balloons, family members who camped out in uncomfortable chairs. I had medical charts and the growing fury that burned brighter each day. On day 3, he had sent a generic get-well-soon card from the hospital gift shop. Not even a personal message, just his signature. Michael. Not love, Michael, or your son, Michael. Just his name, like he was signing a business contract. Victoria hadn't even bothered with that. But their neglect was a gift, really. It gave me time to think, to plan, to remember exactly who I was dealing with. I thought about the night Michael graduated college, how I had worked 3 jobs to pay his tuition while he partied with fraternity brothers who didn't know their single mother was cleaning office buildings at 2 a.m. to afford their beer money. I thought about his wedding day, when Victoria had made it clear that my presence was an embarrassment. How I had been seated in the back, treated like a distant relative rather than the mother of the groom. How Victoria had forgotten to include me in family photos, claiming I wouldn't photograph well in my off-the-rack dress. I thought about all the birthdays, holidays, and special occasions where I had been an afterthought. The times I had been uninvited to parties because Victoria thought I was too old or wouldn't fit in with their crowd. Most of all, I thought about the money. For 31 years, I had been Michael's safety net. When he needed a down payment for his first apartment, I had taken out a second mortgage. When he wanted to start his consulting business, I had liquidated my retirement account. When he and Victoria bought their mansion, I had co-signed the loan and provided the down payment from my life insurance policy. Over the years, I had given him nearly $850,000. Not loans, gifts. Because that's what mothers do for their children, right? They sacrifice everything and expect nothing in return. Except respect. Except love. Except the basic human decency of showing up when your mother is dying in a hospital bed. On my final night in the hospital, as I stared out the window at the city lights, I made a decision that would change everything. Michael thought I was weak. He thought I was disposable. He thought my only value was the money I could provide and the problems I could solve. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I was discharged with a clean bill of health and a heart full of purpose. I took a taxi home to my modest 2-bedroom house, the house I should have paid off years ago if I hadn't spent a fortune supporting my ungrateful son. The first thing I did was shower and put on my best black suit, the one I had worn to my husband's funeral 15 years ago. It still fit perfectly, and the color seemed appropriate for what I was about to do. The second thing I did was call my bank. First National, This is Margaret speaking. Margaret, this is Anna Stephen. I need to schedule an emergency meeting with Mr. Patterson. James Patterson had been my banker for over 20 years. He had watched me scrape together every penny, had approved every loan I had taken to support Michael's dreams. He knew exactly what my financial sacrifices had cost me. Of course, Mrs. Stephen. Is everything all right? Everything is about to be perfect. Can you see me this afternoon? Absolutely. 2 o'clock. Perfect. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My silver hair was perfectly styled, my makeup flawless despite everything I had been through. At 58, I was still a beautiful woman, something I had forgotten during all those years of making myself small to accommodate others. That woman in the mirror looked dangerous. She looked like someone who was done being underestimated. I spent the rest of the morning going through my financial documents, making lists, and preparing for what would be the most important meeting of my life. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into First National Bank wearing my black suit and my most confident smile. James Patterson greeted me with the concern of an old friend. Anna, I heard about your hospital stay. How are you feeling? Like a woman who's finally waking up from a very long sleep, James. He looked puzzled but led me to his office. For the next hour, we went through my accounts, my investments, my assets. Everything was laid out in neat columns and charts, the complete financial picture of a woman who had spent her entire adult life putting everyone else first. I want to make some changes, James. Significant changes. What kind of changes? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. I want to liquidate everything. Savings accounts, CDs, the mutual funds, all of it. I want it moved to new accounts that only I can access. James looked concerned. Anna, that's a very drastic step. Are you sure you've thought this through? I've had a week in a hospital bed to think about it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What about Michael? Doesn't he have access to some of these accounts? Not anymore. James was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. He had been in banking long enough to recognize the look of someone who had reached their breaking point. All right, Anna. Let's do this. As we filled out the paperwork, my phone began to ring. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I smiled and declined the call. By 4 p.m., everything was done. Every account that Michael had access to was closed. Every joint investment was liquidated. Every safety net I had provided was gone. My phone had rung 17 times. As I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. The first phase of my plan was complete. Now it was time for the real fun to begin. My phone rang for the 18th time as I pulled into my driveway. Michael's face glared at me from the screen, his professional headshot from his consulting firm's website, all perfect teeth and false confidence. I had been so proud when that photo was taken, bragging to my neighbors about my successful son. I let it go to voicemail. Then I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down to listen to the messages. The first few were confused. Mom, the bank called me about some account changes. Call me back. By message 5, confusion had turned to concern. Mom, seriously, I need you to call me. They're saying you've closed our joint accounts. By message 10, concern had become panic. What the hell is going on? The bank won't tell me anything. Call me now. The most recent message was pure desperation. Mom, please. I don't understand what's happening. Are you okay? I'm coming over. I checked the timestamp. That last message was from 20 minutes ago. Perfect timing. I had just enough time to freshen my lipstick and prepare my performance before I heard the screech of tires in my driveway. Car doors slammed, and within seconds, my front door was rattling under urgent knocks.
Mom.
Are you in there? I took a sip of my tea, savoring the moment. Then I walked slowly to the door and opened it with the most innocent smile I could muster. Michael stood on my porch, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his face flushed with panic. Behind him, Victoria waited in their Mercedes, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses and obvious irritation. "Michael," I said warmly. "What a pleasant surprise. Please come in." He pushed past me into the living room, his eyes wild. "Mom, what's going on?" "The bank called and said you've been making major account changes. They said you've liquidated everything." I closed the door gently and turned to face him. "Would you like some tea? You look upset." "I don't want tea. I want answers." "What have you done?" I settled into my favorite armchair, the one I had bought used 20 years ago because I couldn't afford new furniture after paying for his MBA. "I've taken control of my finances, dear. At my age, it's important to be organized." "Organized?" His voice cracked. "Mom, you've closed accounts that I need access to. The business account, the emergency fund. Those were my accounts, Michael. But I use them. You know I use them." "I know you do. That's exactly the problem." He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The concept that I might not want him to have unlimited access to my money had apparently never occurred to him. "Mom, I don't understand. We've always shared accounts. It's practical. If something happens to you, I can take care of your finances." "Something did happen to me, Michael. I nearly died last week." "I know, but where were you?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Michael's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I'll tell you where you were," I continued, my voice still maddeningly calm. "You were at Le Bernardin, enjoying a $300 dinner while your mother lay dying in a hospital bed." "Mom, that's not fair. I didn't know it was that serious." "The nurse told you they weren't sure I'd make it through the night." She was probably being dramatic. Nurses always exaggerate. I set down my teacup and looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become this stranger? When had the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms turned into this cold, calculating man who thought dinner reservations were more important than his mother's life? "Michael, let me ask you something. When was the last time you visited me? Not when you needed something, not when you wanted money, but just to see how I was doing." He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been busy with the business. It's been 8 months. 8 months since you've set foot in this house unless you needed something from me." "That's not true." "It is true. The last time you were here was in February, when you needed me to co-sign for Victoria's new car loan." The memory clearly stung because he looked away. "Mom, you're being unfair. I care about you." "Do you?" "Because when the hospital called and told you I might die, your response was she doesn't have much time anyway." Michael's face went white. "How do you? The nurse told you that."
"She did."
"Along with the rest of your charming response about being too busy for your dying mother." I was in shock. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Michael, darling, you've spent 34 years showing me exactly who you are. Last week, I finally started believing you." "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the life I had built from nothing. "It means I'm done. Done being your bank. Done being your safety net. Done being taken for granted by a son who thinks so little of me that he won't interrupt dinner for my deathbed." "Mom, you're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Tell me, Michael, what's the first thing you thought when the hospital called? Be honest." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I thought about how inconvenient the timing was." "And the second thing?" Another pause. "I wondered if you had updated your will recently." The admission hung between us like a poison cloud. Finally, the truth. "There it is," I said softly. "Your dying mother was an inconvenience, and your inheritance was a concern." Not once did you think about rushing to my side. Not once did you think about holding my hand or telling me you loved me. You thought about money and timing. Mom, I do love you. No, Michael. You love what I can do for you. You love my bank account, my co-signatures, my willingness to solve your problems with my checkbook. But you don't love me. I turned back to face him, and for the first time in his adult life, my son looked genuinely afraid. The accounts you're so worried about? They're gone. Moved to new banks, new account numbers, new everything. The credit cards you use that are linked to my accounts? Cancelled. The car loan I co-signed for Victoria? I've contacted the bank about removing my name. You can't do that. I already have. Michael sank onto my couch, his head in his hands. Mom, why are you doing this? I know I made a mistake, but you can't just cut me off. The business depends on those accounts. Our mortgage is backed by your credit. Our whole life is built on me. Your whole life is built on me, and you've treated me like garbage for years because you thought I would always be there to clean up your messes. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Michael, when was the last time you called me just to say hello? When was the last time you invited me to dinner? When was the last time you included me in your life as anything other than a financial resource? He couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I thought so, I said. Now I suggest you go home and figure out how to live within your actual means instead of mine. Michael stood up, his face a mixture of panic and rage. You can't do this. I'll fight you. I'll have you declared incompetent. You'll what, Michael? Prove to a court that I'm mentally unfit because I finally stopped letting you steal from me? Good luck with that. He stormed toward the door, then turned back one last time. This isn't over, Mom. I smiled, and it was the coldest smile of my life. You're absolutely right, dear. It's not over. It's just beginning. After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. This is ridiculous. You're being selfish and cruel. Michael has a family to support. I deleted the message without responding. Phase 1 was complete. Michael now understood that his cash cow had left the barn. But I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had slept better than I had in months, despite, or perhaps because of, the chaos I had unleashed the day before. My phone showed 37 missed calls from Michael and 12 text messages that grew increasingly desperate as the night wore on. I deleted them all, without reading past the first few words. I had more important things to do. After my morning coffee, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. My college roommate, Sarah Martinez, who had become one of the most successful private investigators in the state. Anna Stephen. Sarah's voice was warm with surprise. It's been way too long. How are you? I'm having the best week of my life, actually. Sarah, I need your help with something. Professional help. What's going on? I need you to investigate my son. There was a pause. Your son? Anna, what's happened? I told her everything. The hospital, the phone call, the years of being taken for granted, the money I had given freely only to be treated like an inconvenience.
Jesus, Ana.
I'm so sorry. What exactly do you want me to find? Everything. His business dealings, his finances, his marriage, his lifestyle. I've been supporting him for years, but I don't actually know what he's been doing with my money. You suspect he's been hiding something? I suspect I've been blind to a lot of things. Can you help me? I'll start immediately. Give me a week. While Sarah began her investigation, I started my own research. I had been so trusting, so willing to write checks without asking questions, that I realized I knew almost nothing about my son's actual financial situation. What I discovered in just 3 days of digging through public records and online searches made my blood boil. Michael's consulting business, which I had helped him start with $150,000 of my retirement money, was doing very well, better than he had ever let me believe. His client list included several Fortune 500 companies, and his annual revenue was over $2 million. The mansion I had helped them buy was now worth $1.8 million, triple what they had paid for it 5 years ago. Victoria's career as a lifestyle influencer was also more lucrative than they had admitted. She had over 500,000 followers on Instagram and commanded $50,000 for a single sponsored post. They weren't struggling. They were wealthy. And yet, they continued to use my credit cards for emergencies, continued to ask for loans they never intended to repay, continued to treat me like their personal ATM. But the real revelation came when I looked at their social media accounts. Victoria's Instagram was a carefully curated showcase of luxury, designer handbags, exotic vacations, expensive restaurants, jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Every post was tagged with designer names and locations that screamed money. What made me sick was realizing that I had paid for most of it. The $80,000 kitchen renovation they had done last year, charged to one of my credit cards as a family emergency. The European vacation they had taken for their anniversary, also on my card, justified as a necessary break for Michael's mental health. Victoria's collection of Hermes bags, each one represented a different crisis that required my immediate financial intervention. I scrolled through months of posts, seeing my money transformed into social media content designed to make others envious of their success. They weren't just taking my money, they were flaunting it while pretending to be self-made. But the post that broke my heart was from the night I was in the hospital. Victoria had posted a picture of their dinner at Le Bernardin, date night at NYC's finest. Sometimes you have to treat yourself to the best. Hashtag blessed, hashtag Le Bernardin, hashtag date night, hashtag no filter needed. The timestamp showed it was posted at 11:47 p.m., exactly when I was lying alone in a hospital bed, wondering if I would live through the night. The comments were full of people praising their success and asking about their secret to affording such luxury. Victoria had responded with emoji and vague references to hard work and smart investments. Smart investments. Like investing in a mother-in-law stupid enough to fund your lifestyle while you treated her like dirt. When Sarah called me a week later, her voice was tight, with controlled anger. Anna, we need to meet. In person. What I found, you're not going to like it. We met at a small cafe downtown, the same place where we used to study for exams 35 years ago. Sarah looked exactly like what she was, a successful woman who didn't suffer fools. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, her eyes were intelligent and kind, and her expression was grim. How bad is it? I asked before she could even sit down. Worse than you think. She opened a file folder thick with documents and photographs. Anna, your son isn't just financially irresponsible. He's been actively defrauding you. What do you mean? Remember that emergency loan you gave him last year for his business? The $75,000 for essential equipment? Of course. He said he needed new computers and software. Sarah slid a photo across the table. It showed Michael and Victoria boarding a private jet, all smiles and designer luggage. This was taken 3 days after you transferred the money. They spent your $75,000 on a 2-week vacation in the Maldives. I stared at the photo, feeling sick. But he showed me invoices for the equipment.
Fake.
Very good fakes, but fake nonetheless. My guess is he is someone creating false documentation for these emergencies. She pulled out more photos, more documents. Each one was another knife in my back. The emergency medical bills for Victoria's supposed surgery? She had gotten elective cosmetic procedures, a nose job, and breast augmentation. The business crisis that required immediate cash injection? They had bought a vacation home in the Hamptons. The tax emergency that threatened his business? They had purchased a boat. Anna, In the past 3 years alone, you've given him over $400,000 in what you thought were emergency loans and business investments. He's spent every penny on luxury items and lifestyle expenses. I felt like I was drowning, but surely some of it went to legitimate expenses?
Some.
But Anna, here's the thing that's really going to upset you. He's been telling people, including his wife, that this money comes from his business success. He's been claiming credit for a lifestyle that you're funding. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was Michael speaking at some kind of business conference. The key to success is making smart investments and living below your means until you can afford to live above them. My wife and I saved aggressively in our 20s, and now we're able to enjoy the fruits of our labor. I watched my son take credit for achievements bought with my money, watched him present himself as a self-made success story, while his audience applauded his wisdom. There's more, Sarah said gently. Anna, he's been using your credit to secure business loans. Your excellent credit rating has guaranteed financing that he never could have gotten on his own. Is that legal? Technically, yes, since you co-signed. But morally? He's built his entire business on your foundation while telling everyone, including you, that he's self-sufficient. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just the money. It was the lies, the manipulation, the complete disrespect for everything I had sacrificed. Sarah, there's something else I need to know. What? The night I was in the hospital. Can you find out what they were really doing? She was quiet for a moment. Anna, are you sure you want to know? I'm sure. She pulled out another set of photos. Michael and Victoria at Le Bernardin, laughing and toasting with champagne. The timestamp showed these were taken during the exact hours when I was fighting for my life. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the woman sitting with them. A blonde, maybe 25, stunning in the way that only youth and money can achieve. She was sitting very close to Michael, her hand on his arm, their body language intimate and familiar. Who is she? I asked, though I already knew. Her name is Amanda Collins. She's a marketing consultant. And Anna, she's been having an affair with Michael for over a year. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Michael hadn't just been stealing my money and lying about it. He had been cheating on his wife while using my funds to pay for his affairs. That night at Le Bernardin wasn't a romantic dinner with Victoria. It was Michael, his wife, and his mistress, celebrating together while his mother lay dying. There's more, Sarah said softly. Victoria knows about the affair. She knows. Not only does she know, she's okay with it. Apparently, they have some kind of arrangement. She gets to maintain her lifestyle and social status, and he gets to play around. As long as the money keeps flowing, everyone's happy. I stared at the photos of my son, his wife, and his mistress, all smiling and toasting while I fought for my life, and I felt something inside me turn to ice. They thought I was weak. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was disposable. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Sarah, I said, my voice deadly calm, I need you to keep investigating. I want to know everything. Every affair. Every lie. Every penny they've stolen. I want documentation of all of it. What are you planning? I smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had finally seen her enemies clearly. I'm planning to remind my son that the woman he dismissed as dying and irrelevant still has a few tricks up her sleeve. The next 2 weeks were the most productive of my life. While Michael left increasingly frantic voicemails and Victoria sent passive-aggressive text messages about my cruel behavior, I was busy orchestrating their downfall with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. First, I met with James Patterson at the bank again. This time, I brought Sarah's investigation file. James, I need to ask you about the loans and credit lines that Michael has secured using my credit rating. James looked uncomfortable. Anna, those are legitimate financial instruments. You co-signed for them. I understand that. But I was wondering, if my financial situation were to change dramatically, how would that affect his ability to maintain those loans? What kind of changes are you talking about? I smiled. Hypothetically, if I were to transfer my assets offshore, or put them in trust, or make other arrangements that removed them from my accessible net worth, his loans would be called in immediately. Banks require co-signers to maintain a certain level of liquidity. If you no longer qualified as a guarantor, he would have to pay everything back at once or lose the collateral. Exactly. And if he couldn't pay? Foreclosure, repossession, bankruptcy, most likely. I nodded.
Thank you, James.
That's very helpful information. Next, I visited my attorney, Margaret Thornton, a sharp woman in her 60s who had handled my legal affairs since my husband's death. Margaret, I need to make some changes to my will. Of course. What kind of changes? I want to remove Michael as my beneficiary. Margaret's eyebrows rose. Anna, that's a significant decision. Are you sure? I handed her a summary of Sarah's investigation. I'm certain. As she read, her expression grew darker. Good God, Anna. This is financial abuse. It's about to become financial justice. We spent the next 3 hours crafting a new will that would ensure Michael received exactly what he deserved. Nothing. Instead, my estate would be divided between my local animal shelter, the women's shelter where I had volunteered for years, and Sarah's daughter, who was struggling to pay for medical school. There is one thing I want to leave Michael, I told Margaret. What's that? A letter. To be read aloud at the will reading. I want him to know exactly why he's been disinherited. What do you want the letter to say? I smiled. That's going to take some time to compose. I want it to be perfect. While Margaret prepared the legal documents, I began phase 2 of my plan, documenting everything. I had saved every email, every text message, every voicemail from Michael over the years. Reading through them now with clear eyes, I could see the pattern of manipulation that I had been blind to before. Every contact was a request for money disguised as a family interaction. Every "I love you" was followed by a request for a loan. Every emergency was carefully timed to maximize my emotional vulnerability. I compiled it all into a comprehensive file. The financial records, the false invoices, the evidence of the affairs, the social media posts flaunting wealth they hadn't earned. It painted a picture of 2 people who had systematically exploited a woman's love for her child. But I wasn't done yet. I hired a forensic accountant to trace exactly where my money had gone. Every vacation, every purchase, every luxury item. I wanted a complete accounting of how my life savings had been transformed into their lifestyle accessories.
The report was damning.
In 5 years, Michael and Victoria had spent over $800,000 of my money on non-essential expenses. Cars, jewelry, travel, clothes, restaurants, entertainment. They had been living like millionaires on my dime while pretending to be struggling young professionals. Meanwhile, I had been eating generic groceries and delaying medical checkups because I thought I needed to save money for the next emergency they would present me with. The forensic accountant also discovered something interesting. Michael had been claiming business tax deductions for expenses I had paid for personally. He was essentially getting tax breaks for spending my money. Mrs. Stephen, the accountant said during our final meeting, this is tax fraud. You could report him to the IRS. I'm keeping that option in reserve, I replied. But first, I want to handle this my way. During this time, Michael's attempts to contact me became increasingly desperate. When I stopped answering his calls, he started showing up at my house. When I stopped answering the door, he began leaving gifts on my porch, flowers, chocolates, expensive wine. All purchased, no doubt, with credit cards I was no longer paying for. The gifts were accompanied by notes that started apologetic and grew increasingly manipulative. Mom, I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. Let's talk. Mom, I know you're upset, but we can work this out. Family is everything. Mom, Victoria is pregnant. Your grandchild needs their grandmother. That last note was particularly pathetic. I knew from Sarah's investigation that Victoria had been seen at a fertility clinic, but the timing was suspicious. A convenient pregnancy, just when their financial support was threatened? How coincidental. I threw all the gifts in the trash without opening them. 3 weeks into my new financial independence, I got a call that made me smile. Mrs. Stephen? This is David Chen from Premier Credit Services. I'm calling about the account linked to Michael Stephen. We've been trying to reach him about some irregularities in his payment history. What kind of irregularities? Well, his account was backed by your credit profile, but we've been notified that you've closed the associated accounts. His payment this month was declined. I see. We'll need him to provide alternative payment arrangements within 7 days, or we'll begin collection procedures. That sounds like his problem, not mine. Ma'am, you were the co-signer. I was. Past tense. I've contacted all relevant institutions about removing my name from his obligations. You should have received the documentation. There was a pause. Yes, we did receive that. Ma'am, can I ask, is there some kind of family dispute? This is very unusual. Young man, let me give you some advice. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. My son showed me exactly who he was, and I finally listened. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Sarah. How's the investigation going? Anna, I've got enough material to write a book. Your son's been busier than I thought. What do you mean? The affair with Amanda? It's not his first. I've found evidence of at least 3 other women over the past 2 years. He's been using her money to maintain multiple relationships. I felt sick but not surprised. What else? He's been telling each of these women that he's getting divorced. Apparently, he's promised to leave Victoria for at least 2 of them. And Victoria knows? Victoria knows and doesn't care as long as he's discreet and the money keeps coming. But Anna, here's the interesting part. She's been having her own affairs. 3 different men in the past year. One of them is married to her best friend. I sat back in my chair, amazed by the depth of the deception. They're both cheating? It gets better. They've been selling some of the expensive gifts you've bought them. Remember that Rolex you gave Michael for his birthday? He sold it and used the money for a weekend getaway with Amanda. He sold his father's watch. The Rolex was new, Anna. But yes, he also sold your husband's vintage watch. The one you gave him when he graduated college. That hit me like a physical blow. The watch had been my husband's most treasured possession, passed down from his father. I had given it to Michael as a symbol of family legacy and love. He had pawned it for fair money. Sarah, I need you to find out where he sold it. I want it back. Already on it. I should have the information by tomorrow. What else do I need to know? Anna, they're in serious financial trouble. Without your support, they can't maintain their lifestyle. Michael's business is profitable, but not enough to cover their expenses. They've been living beyond even his substantial means. How long before they're in real trouble? They're in real trouble now. I estimate they have about 6 weeks before they start missing major payments. Perfect. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went out to dinner alone at the nicest restaurant in town. I wore my best dress, my finest jewelry, and I treated myself to everything I had denied myself while supporting their luxury lifestyle. The meal was exquisite, the service impeccable, and the company, myself, was delightful. I lingered over wine and dessert, savoring every bite of freedom. As I was leaving, I saw a familiar couple at a corner table, Michael and Amanda, his latest mistress. They were leaning close together, whispering intimately, her hand stroking his arm. He looked stressed, older than his 34 years, the weight of his crumbling world evident in his hunched shoulders. He didn't see me, but I took a photo with my phone. Evidence for the collection. The next morning, I received a package from Sarah. Inside was my husband's watch, recovered from the pawn shop where Michael had sold it for a fraction of its value. I held it in my hands, remembering the day I had given it to my son, how proud my husband would have been to see his legacy passed down to the next generation. Michael had thrown that legacy away for the price of a weekend with his mistress. As I fastened the watch around my own wrist, I made a decision. It was time for the final phase of my plan. It was time to let Michael know exactly how much trouble he was in. But first, I had one more surprise to arrange. The envelope arrived at Michael's office on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier with instructions that it must be signed for personally. I knew this because I had paid extra for tracking and confirmation. Inside was a single photograph and a note written in my careful handwriting. Michael, I thought you should know that your mother isn't as weak or as blind as you believed. Some family secrets are harder to keep than others.
Love, Mom.
P.S. Amanda looks lovely in red. I hope the dinner was worth it. The photograph was the one I had taken of him with his mistress at the restaurant, clear and undeniably damning. Within an hour, my phone was ringing. I let it ring. By noon, Michael was pounding on my front door again. This time, I opened it. Mom, we need to talk. Do we? How lovely. Please come in. He followed me into the living room, his face pale and desperate. Mom, about that photo. Which photo, dear? I have so many these days. You know which photo. The one of me and the one you sent to my office. Oh, that photo. Yes, isn't it nice? You both look so happy together. Though I have to say, the lighting in that restaurant really doesn't do justice to Amanda's complexion. Michael stared at me as if I had grown a second head. This was not the mother he knew, the woman who pretended not to notice his affairs, who never confronted him about anything, who absorbed his cruelty with martyred silence. How long have you known? About Amanda specifically? A few weeks. About your affairs in general? Much longer than you think. Mom, I can explain.
Can you?
This should be fascinating. Please, explain to me how a man who is too busy to visit his dying mother found time to maintain multiple affairs while using her money to pay for them. He sat down heavily on my couch. It's complicated. I'm sure it is. Let me simplify it for you. You're a liar, a cheat, and a thief. How's that for uncomplicated? Mom, you don't understand. My marriage to Victoria is a sham. Yes, I know. I know she's having affairs too. I know you've both been using my money to fund your separate romantic adventures while pretending to be a happy couple. Michael's mouth fell open. How could you possibly know that? Michael, darling, you've spent years treating me like I'm stupid. The truth is, I'm not stupid. I was just in love with the idea of having a son who cared about me. But love can make us blind to a lot of things. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thick folder. However, private investigators don't suffer from maternal delusions. They deal in facts. You hired a private investigator? I hired the best private investigator in the state. Would you like to see her report? I opened the folder and began reading from the summary page. Subject: Michael David Stephen. Age 34. Occupation: management consultant. Marital status: married to Victoria and Stephen, though both parties maintain extramarital relationships with the full knowledge of the other party. Michael's face was ashen. Financial status: appears successful but is entirely dependent on financial support from his mother, Anna Stephen. Has systematically defrauded said mother of approximately $800,000 over the past 5 years through false emergency claims and fabricated business expenses. Mom, please. Shall I continue? There's a lovely section about your tax fraud. Did you know that claiming personal expenses as business deductions is illegal? Particularly when those personal expenses were paid by someone else. Michael stood up abruptly. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And that's exactly why this is so heartbreaking. I closed the folder and looked at him, really looked at him. Michael, when did you become this person? When did you decide that having a mother who loved you unconditionally was a weakness to exploit rather than a gift to treasure? I never thought of it that way. Didn't you? Then explain to me why, in 5 years of marriage, you've never once invited me to dinner at your house. Explain why the only time you call me is when you need money. Explain why you dismissed me as dying and irrelevant when the hospital called. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was small. I guess I took you for granted. You guess? I did. I took you for granted. But Mom, I do love you. No, Michael. You love what I could do for you. You love my bank account, my credit rating, my willingness to solve your problems with my checkbook. But you don't love me. That's not true. When was the last time you asked about my health without needing something? When was the last time you called just to say hello? When was the last time you showed any interest in my life that wasn't related to my ability to give you money? He couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I'll tell you when, Michael. Never. In your entire adult life, you have never once treated me as a person worthy of love and respect. I was a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved when I became inconvenient. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of his latest gift, an expensive bouquet he'd left on my porch the day before. Even now, when you're trying to apologize, your gifts are generic and thoughtless. These flowers are beautiful, but they're my least favorite type. You would know that if you had ever paid attention to me as a person rather than as a source of funding. I'm trying to make things right. Are you? Or are you trying to restore access to my money? Because I noticed that your contrition began exactly when your access to my accounts ended. Michael's composure finally cracked.
Fine.
Yes, I need the money. Is that what you want to hear? My business depends on it, my marriage depends on it, my whole life depends on it. Without your support, I'll lose everything. There it is, I said softly. The truth at last.
Mom, please.
I know I've been a terrible son, but you can't just cut me off. I'll do better, I promise. I'll change. Will you? Prove it.
How?
I pulled out a sheet of paper from a folder. This is a list of every false emergency, every fabricated crisis, every lie you've told me to get money over the past 5 years. I want you to go through each item and explain to me what the money was really used for. Michael looked at the list, and I watched his face cycle through emotions: shame, anger, desperation, and finally, resignation. Mom, I can't do that. Why not? Because it would prove that you're right about me. The admission hung between us like a confession in church. Michael, I already know I'm right about you. The question is whether you're capable of acknowledging what you've become and doing something about it. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the list of his deceptions. What do you want from me? He asked finally. I want my son back. The little boy who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. The teenager who was so proud when he got his first job. The young man who called me crying when his father died because he was afraid he wouldn't know how to be a man without him. Tears were forming in Michael's eyes. I remember that person.
Do you?
Because I haven't seen him in years. All I see now is a stranger who treats me like an ATM with an inconvenient personality attached. How do I get him back? I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was going about its business. People heading to work, children walking to school, life continuing as if my family wasn't falling apart. I don't know if you can, Michael. That person was honest. He was grateful. He understood that love isn't something you take for granted. I can learn to be that person again. Can you? Because it's not just about changing your behavior with me. It's about becoming someone who's capable of authentic relationships with anyone. And that includes your wife. What do you mean? I turned back to face him. Michael, your marriage is built on lies and mutual exploitation. You're both cheating, you're both pretending, you're both using other people to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. How exactly do you plan to build an authentic relationship with me when you can't even have one with your own wife? Victoria and our relationship is complicated. Your relationship is fake. Your business partners masquerading as spouses, and not very convincing ones at that. Maybe you're right, but Mom, I can't fix everything at once. Can't we start with us? I looked at my son, this man who had hurt me so deeply, but who was also the child I had raised and loved, and felt my resolve weaken for just a moment. Then I remembered the hospital, the phone call, the dismissive cruelty in his voice as he chose dinner reservations over his dying mother. Michael, I want you to leave now. Mom, I want you to go home and think very carefully about the man you've become. I want you to think about what you're willing to sacrifice to change that. And I want you to understand that this conversation is the last free gift I'm giving you. What does that mean? It means that everything else, my forgiveness, my trust, my love, has to be earned. And it's going to cost you everything you thought you were entitled to. As he reached the door, Michael turned back one last time. Mom, what if I can't change? What if I try, but I can't become the person you want me to be? I smiled, and it was the saddest smile of my life. Then you'll have learned something important about consequences, won't you? After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Sarah. How did it go? She asked. He knows that I know everything. Now we wait and see what he does with that knowledge. Do you think he'll actually change? I looked out at my GA. 2 weeks after my confrontation with Michael, the consequences of his choices began cascading through his life like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. It started with the cars. Victoria called me at 7 a.m. on a Thursday, her voice high with panic and barely controlled rage. Anna, what have you done? They've repossessed my Mercedes. I was in my garden, deadheading roses and enjoying the crisp autumn morning. Good morning, Victoria. How lovely to hear from you. Don't play games with me. They towed my car from the spa parking lot. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I imagine it was quite embarrassing, though I'm not sure why you're calling me about it. Because you co-signed for the loan. They said the guarantor removed their backing, so the full balance was due immediately.
Yes. I did remove my name from that loan.
I thought I mentioned that to Michael. You can't do that. We need that car. I smiled, clipping a particularly beautiful white rose. Victoria, darling, I can do whatever I want with my own credit and my own money. The car loan was contingent on my guarantee. I removed my guarantee. But what am I supposed to drive? I suppose that's between you and the bank now, isn't it? Anna, this is ridiculous. You're being vindictive and petty. Am I? Tell me, Victoria, when was the last time you showed me any kindness that wasn't motivated by needing something? There was silence on the other end of the line. I'm waiting, I continued. One instance of genuine affection or respect that wasn't connected to wanting access to my resources. More silence. I thought so. Victoria, you've spent 5 years treating me like an inconvenience while living off my money. Did you really think there would never be consequences? We'll get another car loan. With what credit? Michael's credit rating is about to take a dramatic downturn. But best of luck with that. I hung up and went back to my roses. The next call came from Michael, 3 hours later. Mom, they've called in the business loans. Have they? How unfortunate. Mom, this isn't a joke. Without those loans, I can't maintain my office lease. I can't pay my employees. I can't. You can't maintain a lifestyle you never earned. Yes, I understand. I need your help.
No, Michael.
You need to face reality. What reality? The reality that success built on other people's foundations isn't success at all. It's just elaborate pretending. Mom, please. If I lose the business, we'll lose everything. You never had anything, Michael. You had access to my resources, which you mistook for your own wealth. Those are very different things. I'll pay you back. I'll pay back every penny. With what money? Your business is profitable, but not enough to support the lifestyle you've been maintaining. Without my subsidies, you can't afford your mortgage, your cars, your credit cards, or Victoria's shopping habits. There was a long pause. How long have you known? Known what? That we were living beyond our means. I've suspected for years. But I wanted to believe that my son was the success story he pretended to be. Mom, I never meant for it to go this far. It got out of control. No, Michael. You got out of control. You started believing your own lies about being self-made when everything you had was built on my sacrifice. What do you want me to do? I want you to sell the house. What? You heard me. Sell the house, pay off your debts, and learn to live within your actual means. But where would we live? The same place millions of other people live, in housing they can actually afford. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Michael, you're 34 years old. It's time you learned the difference between what you want and what you've earned. The conversation ended with Michael hanging up on me, which was probably for the best. Over the next week, I watched their world crumble through a combination of Sarah's surveillance and their own social media activity. Victoria's Instagram posts became increasingly desperate. Gone were the luxury lifestyle shots, replaced by vague posts about temporary setbacks and challenges that make us stronger. The comments from her followers were telling. People were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about their sudden lifestyle changes. Michael's business began to hemorrhage clients. Word travels fast in their social circle, and nothing damages a consultant's reputation like visible financial instability. If he couldn't manage his own finances, why would anyone trust him with theirs? But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. Sarah called me on Friday afternoon with barely contained glee in her voice. Anna, you're going to love this. What happened? Victoria's best friend, Stephanie, just found out about Victoria's affair with her husband. I nearly choked on my tea. How did she find out? Victoria got sloppy. She's been using Michael's credit cards for her affair since yours were canceled. When Michael couldn't pay the credit card bills, the statements got sent to collections. Stephanie works for the collection agency. Oh my God. It gets better. Stephanie recognized the charges, hotel rooms, restaurants, spa treatments, all on the same days her husband claimed to be traveling for business. She put two and two together. What's she going to do? She's filing for divorce. And she's naming Victoria as a correspondent in the adultery claim. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with genuine sympathy for Stephanie. That poor woman. There's more. Stephanie is also Michael's biggest client. His consulting firm handles all the financial planning for her family's business. Let me guess, not anymore? She fired him this morning, in front of half the country club. I had to admire the poetic justice of it all. Victoria's affair, funded by my money, had destroyed not only her friendship, but also Michael's most profitable business relationship. How are they handling it? Not well. My sources say they had a screaming fight in their driveway last night. The neighbors called the police because they thought it was a domestic violence situation. Was it? No. Just two people realizing that their house of cards is collapsing and they have no one to blame but themselves. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at the same restaurant where I had spotted Michael with his mistress. This time, I sat at the bar and enjoyed a wonderful conversation with the bartender, a young man working his way through law school. As I was leaving, I noticed a familiar figure in the corner booth, Amanda Collins, Michael's mistress. But this time she was with a different man. Older, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. I couldn't resist walking past their table on my way out. "Amanda," I said brightly. "How lovely to see you again." She looked up, startled and confused. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "Not formally, no. But I feel like I know you quite well. I'm Anna Stephen, Michael's mother." The color drained from her face. Her companion looked between us, clearly sensing tension but not understanding its source. "I just wanted to thank you," I continued, my voice sweet as honey. "Thank me? For helping me understand exactly what kind of man my son really is. Your relationship has been quite illuminating." Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I hope your evening is lovely," I said to both of them. "Though I should mention, Michael might be a bit distracted lately. Something about financial difficulties. I'm sure it's temporary." I walked away, leaving Amanda to explain to her new gentleman friend why a strange woman was discussing her financial troubles. When I got home, I found Michael sitting on my front porch steps. He looked like he had aged a decade in the past month. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Mom, we need to talk." "Do we?" "It's rather late, Michael."
Please.
5 minutes. I unlocked my front door and gestured for him to come in. We sat in my living room, the room where I had raised him, where I had comforted him through heartbreaks and celebrated his achievements, where I had believed in him long after he had stopped deserving it. "Mom, I'm losing everything." "Are you?" "The business is collapsing. We can't make the mortgage payments. Victoria is talking about divorce. I don't know what to do." I looked at my son, this broken man who had spent years taking my love for granted, and felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness, anger, disappointment, and buried deep beneath it all, the aching love of a mother who remembers the sweet child he used to be. "Michael, what do you want from me?" "I want you to help me save what's left."
Why?
"Because I'm your son. You're my son when you need money. The rest of the time, I'm just an inconvenience you tolerate." "That's not true, isn't it?" "Michael, be honest with me, and more importantly, be honest with yourself. If I had never had any money, if I had been a poor single mother struggling to get by, would you have treated me any better?"
He was quiet for a long time.
"I don't know," he said finally. "I think you do know, and I think that's the problem. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth. About everything. About why you've treated me the way you have. About what I actually mean to you versus what my money means to you. About whether you're capable of loving me without financial incentive." Michael put his head in his hands. "I don't know if I can do that." "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid of what the truth will reveal about me." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Self-awareness was the first step toward change. "Michael, the truth is already revealed. Your actions have shown me exactly who you are. The question is whether you're brave enough to acknowledge it and do something about it. And if I am, if I tell you the truth and try to change, then we'll see what happens. And if I'm not." I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it. "Then you'll discover that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt." As he left, Michael turned back one more time. "Mom, do you still love me?" I looked at this man who had hurt me so deeply, who had taken my love and twisted it into something ugly, who had reduced me to a source of funding rather than a human being deserving of respect. "I love the boy you used to be," I said softly. "Whether I can love the man you've become remains to be seen." After he left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my garden under the stars. Tomorrow, I would take the final step in my plan. Tomorrow, Michael would learn the full extent of the consequences he had earned. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of grief for the relationship we had lost and the uncertain hope that it might, somehow, still be saved. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose that felt almost electric. Today was the day I would show Michael the complete picture of what he had done to me and what I was prepared to do about it. I dressed carefully in my best navy blue suit, the one I had worn to important business meetings back when I was still working. I wanted to look professional, powerful, unshakable. I applied my makeup with precision, styled my silver hair perfectly, and chose my most elegant jewelry. If I was going to destroy my son's world, I was going to do it looking like the formidable woman I had always been beneath the accommodating mother exterior. At exactly 10 a.m., I called Michael. Mom? Michael, I need you and Victoria to come to my house this afternoon. 2 o'clock sharp.
Why?
What's this about? It's about the future. Both yours and mine. Mom, if this is about the money, it's about much more than money, Michael. But yes, finances will be discussed. Should I bring my lawyer? I smiled. Bring whomever you like. But Michael? Yes. Come prepared to hear some truths you've been avoiding for a very long time. At exactly 2 p.m., Michael and Victoria arrived. They looked like they were attending a funeral, which was oddly appropriate given what I was about to bury. Victoria had clearly been crying. Her makeup was smudged despite obvious attempts at repair. Michael looked like he hadn't slept in days. They sat on my couch like defendants awaiting sentencing. Thank you for coming, I said, settling into my favorite chair. I thought it was time we had a comprehensive conversation about our family relationships. I had prepared a presentation, complete with printed documents, photographs, and a timeline. 31 years of motherhood reduced to evidence of betrayal. Let's start with the basics, I said, opening my first folder. Michael, do you remember what you said when the hospital called to tell you I was dying? Mom, we've been through this. Answer the question.
He looked down.
I said you didn't have much time anyway.
Yes.
Your dying mother was dismissed as an inconvenience because you had dinner reservations. Victoria, do you remember what you posted on Instagram that night? Victoria's face went pale. Anna, I don't. You posted a picture of your meal at Le Bernardin with a caption, "Sometimes you have to treat yourself to the best." While my son's mother was fighting for her life, I showed them a printout of the post. But here's what's particularly interesting about this photo. You weren't alone, were you? I pulled out the surveillance photos Sarah had taken. Michael, Victoria, and Amanda all toasting together while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. You brought your mistress to dinner while your mother-in-law was dying, I said to Victoria. And you, I turned to Michael, thought this was an appropriate way to spend the evening after being told I might not survive the night. The rest of the confrontation unfolded with surgical precision, every lie exposed, every manipulation documented, every cruel moment captured in photographs and bank statements. By the time I finished, they understood the full scope of their betrayal and the complete extent of the consequences they would face. 3 months after my final confrontation with Michael and Victoria, I was living a life I barely recognized and loving every minute of it. The house felt different now that it was truly mine again, not just a place where I existed between funding other people's dreams. I had redecorated the living room, bought myself new furniture for the first time in decades, and converted Michael's old bedroom into a beautiful home office where I was writing my memoir. Yes, I was writing a book. At 58, I had decided to document my journey from doormat to self-advocate, hoping it might help other women recognize when they're being financially and emotionally abused by their own families. My mornings now began with yoga in my sunroom, followed by coffee in my garden while I planned my day. I had joined a book club, started taking painting classes, and begun volunteering at the women's shelter 3 days a week. For the first time in decades, my schedule was my own. But the most satisfying change was financial. Without Michael and Victoria draining my resources, I was not only comfortable, I was thriving. The money I had been hemorrhaging to fund their lifestyle was now being invested, saved, and occasionally spent on things that brought me joy. I had bought myself a new car, a beautiful silver BMW that I drove with the windows down and the music up, feeling like a teenager again. I had taken a cruise to Alaska, something I had dreamed of doing with my late husband, but never could afford because there was always another emergency requiring my savings. Most importantly, I had hired a housekeeper, a gardener, and a personal shopper. If Michael and Victoria could live like royalty on my dime, I decided I could certainly afford to treat myself like the queen of my own domain. The phone calls had stopped after the first month. Michael's desperate attempts at contact had dwindled from daily to weekly to nothing at all. I knew from Sarah's continued surveillance that they were struggling. The house was in foreclosure. Victoria had been forced to get an actual job, and Michael's business was barely surviving with only a handful of clients who hadn't heard about his financial scandals. I felt no guilt about their situation. They were simply experiencing the natural consequences of their choices without my interference. But on a Tuesday morning in January, my peaceful routine was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. I was in my garden, planting the spring plantings, when I heard the doorbell. Through the security camera I had installed, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, blonde, well-dressed, probably in her 40s. I opened the door to find Amanda Collins, Michael's former mistress, standing on my porch with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Stephen? I'm Amanda. I think you know who I am." "I do. What can I do for you, dear? May I come in? I need to talk to you about Michael." I considered this for a moment. Curiosity won over caution. "Please come in." Amanda settled into my living room chair, looking around with obvious appreciation for the elegant decor. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you. I've recently redecorated." When you're no longer funding other people's lifestyles, you'd be amazed how much money you have for your own comfort. Amanda winced. "Mrs. Stephen, I need you to know that I had no idea Michael was using your money to pay for our relationship." "Didn't you? He was unemployed for 2 months last year but continued taking you on expensive vacations. You never wondered where the money was coming from." "He told me he had family money. He said you were wealthy and that you enjoyed helping him." I laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Enjoyed helping him? Yes, I can see how he would frame it that way. "Mrs. Stephen, I'm here because I need you to know the truth about what happened that night." "Which night?" "The night you were in the hospital. Michael told me his mother was fine, that it was just routine tests. He said you had insisted he keep our dinner plans because you didn't want him to worry." I set down my teacup and looked at Amanda carefully. "Go on." "When I found out later what really happened, that you nearly died and that Michael lied to me about it, I ended our relationship immediately." "When did you find out?" 2 weeks later. "I saw a post from one of your neighbors on Facebook about your hospital stay. I confronted Michael, and he admitted he had lied." "And how did you feel about that?" Amanda's composure cracked. "I felt sick. Mrs. Stephen, I'm not a homewrecker. I thought Michael was separated, heading for divorce. He told me his marriage was just a business arrangement and that you supported his decision to find happiness elsewhere. All lies. All lies." When I realized what kind of man I had been involved with, I was horrified. No matter how I felt about him, I would never have continued seeing someone who could dismiss his dying mother for a dinner date. I studied Amanda's face, looking for signs of deception, but she seemed genuinely distressed. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Michael came to see me last week." "Oh." "He begged me to take him back. He said that losing you and Victoria and his business had made him realize that I was the only real love he'd ever had." "And what did you tell him?" Amanda's expression hardened. "I told him that any man who could lie to his mistress about his dying mother was a man I wanted nothing to do with." And then I told him something else. What? I told him that he had lost the most valuable thing in his life, a mother who loved him unconditionally because he was too selfish and stupid to appreciate her. I felt an unexpected warmth toward this woman who had unknowingly helped destroy my illusions about my son. Amanda, I appreciate you coming here, but why does this matter to you? Because I want you to know that not everyone in Michael's life supported his treatment of you. And because I want you to know that what you did, cutting him off, forcing him to face consequences, was exactly what he needed. You think so? I know so. Michael is a spoiled child in a man's body. No one has ever told him no, ever made him face the results of his choices. You gave him the greatest gift possible, the chance to grow up. And is he taking advantage of that opportunity? Amanda was quiet for a moment. I don't know. He's certainly suffering. But whether he's learning from that suffering or just feeling sorry for himself, I honestly can't tell. What's your impression? My impression is that Michael is more concerned with getting his life back than with understanding why he lost it in the first place. I nodded. That sounded exactly like the son I knew. Amanda, can I ask you something? Of course. During your relationship with Michael, did he ever express genuine love for you? Or were you more of an escape from his real life? She considered the question seriously. I think I was an escape. Michael doesn't seem capable of genuine intimacy with anyone. He treats people like they're there to serve his needs, financial, emotional, physical. I don't think he actually loves anyone, including himself. That's a sad way to live. It is. But, Mrs. Stephen, it's not your responsibility to fix him. No, it's not. Amanda stood to leave. I want you to know something else. What you did took incredible courage. Most people would have continued enabling him rather than face the pain of setting boundaries. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the right thing. Michael may never appreciate what you gave him, but I do. You showed him what real strength looks like. After Amanda left, I sat in my garden and thought about our conversation. It was strangely comforting to know that not everyone in Michael's orbit had been complicit in his treatment of me. But what struck me most was Amanda's observation that Michael was more concerned with getting his life back than understanding why he had lost it. That evening, I received a call that proved her point. Mom. Michael's voice was small, defeated. Hello, Michael. Mom, I need help. What kind of help? Financial help. We're going to lose the house next week if we can't make a payment. I see. I know you're angry with me, but please, I'm begging you, just this once. I'll pay you back, I promise. Michael, have you learned anything from the past 3 months? I've learned that I can't survive without your support. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant, have you learned why I withdrew my support? Have you gained any insight into your behavior and how it affected me? There was a long pause. Mom, I know I wasn't the best son. Stop. Just stop. What? Michael, you're doing it again. You're minimizing your behavior, avoiding responsibility, and trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for you. I'm not trying to manipulate you. Aren't you? You called me asking for money without once acknowledging the damage you've caused. You haven't apologized. You haven't shown any genuine remorse, and you haven't demonstrated any understanding of why I made the choices I did. Mom, I am sorry. For what, specifically? Another pause. For not being there when you were in the hospital. What else? For taking your money? What else? I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say something that shows me you understand what you did to me. I want you to acknowledge the years of emotional abuse, the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my feelings and well-being. Mom, you're being dramatic. I hung up. 5 minutes later, he called back. Mom, don't hang up. Please. Give me one reason why I shouldn't. Because I love you. Michael, you don't love me. You love what I can do for you. And until you understand the difference, we have nothing to discuss. I hung up again and turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to find an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Michael, 5 pages of small, desperate handwriting.
Mom,
I've been sitting in my car outside your house for 3 hours, trying to find the courage to knock on your door. I know you won't see me, so I'm writing this instead. You're right about everything. You're right that I don't really love you, not the way a son should love his mother. I love what you represent. Safety, security, someone who will always fix my problems. You're right that I've been manipulating you for years. Every time I called, every time I visited, every time I said I loved you, there was always an agenda. I was always working towards something: money, co-signatures, bailouts. You're right that I dismissed your feelings and treated you like an inconvenience. The night you were in the hospital, my first thought wasn't about losing you. It was about how your timing was messing up my plans. I am selfish, cruel, and manipulative. I've spent years taking advantage of your love while giving nothing real in return. I have used you, lied to you, and treated you like garbage while you sacrificed everything for me. But Mom, here's what I need you to know. Losing you has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Not because of the money, though that's been hard, but because for the first time in my adult life, I've had to look at myself clearly, and I hate what I see. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I'm capable of being the son you deserved. But I want to try. Not to get my life back, not to restore my lifestyle, but because I finally understand what I lost when I lost your respect. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for help. I'm just asking for the chance to prove that I can become someone worthy of your love. If you give me that chance, I promise I will earn it. And if you don't, I understand. I've done nothing to deserve your forgiveness. Your son, I hope. Michael. I read the letter 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation, for hidden agendas, for the calculated emotional appeals that had characterized our relationship for so long. But this felt different. This felt real. For the first time in years, Michael had acknowledged the full scope of his behavior without trying to minimize it or excuse it. He had taken complete responsibility without trying to make me feel guilty for my response. It was a start. Not a solution, not a guarantee, but a start. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat in my garden, thinking about second chances and whether some bridges could be rebuilt after all. Time would tell. 2 years later, I was sitting in my garden, reading a letter from the publisher who wanted to option my memoir for a television series, when Michael called. Mom, are you sitting down? I'm always sitting down when you call me with news. What is it this time? Victoria's been arrested. For what? Embezzlement. Apparently, she's been stealing from her employer to maintain her lifestyle after our divorce. They caught her moving money into offshore accounts. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with genuine sadness. How much? Over $200,000. Mom, they're saying she could get 5 to 10 years. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, I feel sorry for her. Not because she doesn't deserve consequences, but because I understand now what it's like to lose everything due to your own poor choices. That's very mature of you. I learned from the best teacher. We talked about his work at the mission, his promotion to program director, and his new relationship with Sarah, a social worker who valued integrity over wealth. For the first time in his adult life, Michael was building something real based on honesty and mutual respect. As our conversation continued, I reflected on the journey we had all taken. Michael had transformed from entitled manipulator to genuine helper. Victoria had gone from social climber to convicted felon. And I had evolved from enabler to empowered woman who finally understood her own worth. After we hung up, I sat in my garden and thought about the night in the hospital when I nearly died alone, dismissed by my only child as an inconvenience. How that moment of absolute clarity had given me the strength to demand better treatment and refuse to accept less than I deserved. My phone rang again, Michael calling back. Mom, I forgot to tell you something. What's that? Sarah asked me what the most important lesson I've learned from you was. And what did you tell her? I told her that you taught me the difference between being loved and being respected, and that real love, the kind worth having, includes both. That's beautiful, Michael. It's true. Mom, thank you for teaching me that lesson the hard way. It was the only way I would have learned it. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, excellent wine, from a bottle I had bought simply because I wanted it, and raised it in a toast to my reflection in the garden window. Here's to second chances, I said aloud. Here's to standing up for yourself. And here's to the beautiful truth that it's never too late to rewrite your story. At 60, I was finally living the life I deserved. I had earned it not by taking anything from anyone else, but by finally understanding my own value and refusing to accept anything less. Michael had called me vindictive when I first cut him off. Victoria had called me bitter and cruel. They were wrong about my motivations, but they were right about one thing. I had gotten the last laugh. But the beautiful thing about this particular last laugh was that everyone was better for it. Michael had become a man of integrity. I had found my strength and voice. And even Victoria, facing the consequences of her choices in prison, might finally learn the lessons that privilege had prevented her from learning before. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to face their own consequences. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to be diminished by other people's poor choices. As I finished my wine and prepared for dinner with my dear friend Sarah, I felt a lightness I had never experienced before. I was free. Free from manipulation, free from guilt, free from the exhausting work of loving people who couldn't love me back properly. I was Anna Stephen, a woman who had learned to value herself and demand that others do the same. And if that wasn't the sweetest last laugh of all, I didn't know what was. If Anna's story is touching your heart, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is enforce consequences with courage and grace. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of resilience and justice. Now, let's see what happens when Anna finally puts herself first.